After the buzzer, May 6th edition, we're going to be talking NBA playoffs. This is your pal Mike Gross and my pal Gordie Jones, and we're going to be doing some Sixers and some sort of questions that make you go, we think and hope about the NBA. We're right in the middle of the NBA playoffs. You might be thinking this is just an NBA podcast. It isn't. We're going to get to other stuff, but right now, this time of year, there's a lot going on in that realm, and that's where we are. And Gordie was yesterday at the Sixers game, which was a huge loss. Mm-hmm. The Sixers give up the home court advantage in that series. Mm-hmm. It's 2-2 with two of the last three in Toronto. These games are big. Yeah. You know, you were there. What did it feel like, and what are your observations?
Well, it's funny to me because Game 3, you thought, okay, the Sixers have control of the series. Mm. And then you come out in Game 4, and it's totally different, which reinforces the notion that every game in a playoff series is an entity unto itself.
And everybody overreacts to what just happened. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is so... It's kind of hard not to. To some extent, it's understandable because, I mean, think about how different Game 2 was from Game 1 in this series, and then how insanely different a Sixers win in Game 2 was from Game 3.
Yeah.
You know, it's somewhat understandable, but you would think that people who have been doing this for as long as some of these guys on ESPN and then national media people would have a little bit better sense of it, but... You know.
It's the time in which we live. I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, right.
I mean, there were a couple things that really jumped out at me about the game yesterday. First of all, I didn't think the crowd was as engaged as it had been the game before. I mean, it was still loud, but not quite to the degree that it was.
I absolutely noticed that, and sometimes I notice that, and I'll hear somebody say it on talk radio, and you're full of crap, but... that's how it looked.
That's how I thought.
That's how it seemed on TV. Obviously, you're a much better judge of it being there, but yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's because it's a weekend crowd and maybe it's a little different than a weekday crowd, or maybe there's a little bit of complacency that is set in. But for whatever reason, the crowd was not as engaged, and the team wasn't as engaged right off the top. Now, in the first half, this was a stunning stat to me. The Sixers shot 11 for 27 on shots in the paint, and that to me is what came back and bit them in the end. You know, they ended up 17 for 37, which is pretty terrible, and Toronto was 19 for 31. That's a big difference to me. In a game like that.
That is a big difference. And another one, I think, which surprised me, and I didn't really notice this until I thought about it, fast break points were like 26-8 or something like that in Toronto's favor.
Yeah. So I thought that Toronto really, they did what they needed to do in terms of matching the Sixers' force. I mean, Nick Nurse had said that after Game 3 that they didn't play tough enough. And that was obviously a point of emphasis. They played Ibaka and Gasol together a lot, which they hadn't really done before in the series, which I think makes a difference. And both of them played well, as did Kyle Lowry. So, you know, and then Kawhi Leonard, which is a separate topic unto itself.
Yeah, we're going to talk Kawhi because we're just amazed by Kawhi. I just think he is a great, great basketball player. And, you know, I guess we have to say that right now, you know, Giannis and Durant, you know, everybody seems to think they're the best players in the world right now. But this guy, I don't know. I don't know that there's a better basketball player alive than this dude right now.
At both ends.
Yes, that's the key thing. And although Durant has gotten pretty good defensively too, he's a good defender. But and also here's another thing about Kawhi. I think he would translate to almost any other era. I think better than any of these other guys. I can easily imagine him, a version of him in the 70s being one of the 2 or 3 best players in the 70s or the 80s.
That's a pretty good thought. I mean, he's a 6'7" guy who can pretty much do anything he wants.
He's so strong. He palms the ball like it's a softball, and yeah, he's just really something. I'm amazed by this guy.
Now, the thing that you honed in on is something else. Is something that I also honed in on after the game yesterday. Brett Brown said that Kawhi was Kobe-like, which is quite a comparison since personality-wise they couldn't be more different.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I'm not objective about Kobe because I'm not a Kobe fan. But I'm not a Kobe fan because of things that I don't like about the way he, about his mentality and the way he played. But I really believe right now Kawhi is as good as Kobe has ever been. Now, Brett Brown was talking specifically about the ability to get your shot, which, it's certainly not. Kobe was really good at that, but Kawhi is a more efficient offensive player than Kobe ever was. I mean, and particularly so now. Now, we're talking about a guy who's absolutely at the absolute peak of his powers right now, so it's a little unfair to judge him historically at this moment, maybe. But man, I'm taken with this guy.
Oh yeah, I mean because he scored 39 in Game 4. He's averaging 38 on 62% shooting.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah.
And most of it is jump shots.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is something that I thought about yesterday watching the game, and also wrote today just about how when he broke into the NBA out of San Diego State, basically San Antonio took him and built his jump shot from the ground up. Chip Engelland was the shooting coach, and he gets a lot of the credit for making Kawhi what he has ultimately become.
And he was a very skilled guy he was a very athletic guy who was not a very skilled guy coming out of college.
And,
totally.
now he's both.
I'll say. Yeah.
So it's really interesting. Of course, Brett Brown was in player development with San Antonio at that point.
Yeah,
so
that's right. That's a good point.
He of all people can appreciate what Kawhi has become, the time that he has put in, and how he's just become an amazing player at both ends of the court, and really the least self-promoting guy ever. Now, here's an interesting thing, too. If you think about last year, he played 9 games because of an injury. There was apparently a little back and forth, some drama with him in San Antonio, which is really uncharacteristic of both sides.
Yeah.
And that led to a trade, which was ultimately beneficial to both sides. They traded him to Toronto for DeMar DeRozan, which is a really great trade.
It shows you how wrong I was. I thought that whole mess last year had Derrick Rose written all over it. Like this guy, this guy's got his own doctor and his own people that are in his head, and the Spurs people are telling him something different, and so I'm just going to sit and watch it. And that's how it felt to me.
Yeah.
God, I was wrong about that.
Yeah, so he's obviously just returned back to whatever level he was at before. And I'll be really curious to see where he ends up. You hear a lot about that he's going to end up with the Clippers, which would be a really interesting situation considering how they were this year. And they really don't have a superstar player, but they have a bunch of really good players.
Now, I heard he just bought a $13 million home in San Diego, like northern San Diego, right at the freeway where he can make a quick commute to the Clippers. Yeah.
Well, that would be I think that'd be a great fit.
And the thing about this series though with him is, as good a team as Toronto was defensively and everything else all year. I mean, they've been the second best record in the league or close, something like that.
Second best, yes.
Yeah. I don't think they have a shot in this series if he doesn't go crazy.
It would appear.
If he just is okay, I don't think they have enough guys that can score to beat the Sixers. It
certainly seems that
totally. It reminds me of like in high school football where there's a Division I running back and nobody can tackle him, and you're watching the game and you're thinking, well, now if this guy they're winning this game in a blowout. If he was on the other team would be winning this game in a blowout. He's the total difference in the series.
It's really interesting just how great he has been, and here's an interesting thing too that I just thought about. And that is after Game 3, when Embiid had 33, somebody said to Brett Brown, "Are you comfortable saying you have the best player in the series?" And he said, yes.
He said yes.
And it's amazing how much that's changed over the last 72 hours or whatever time frame it might be. So,
and obviously, you'd probably say yes if you were him too in that spot.
Of course.
You're stumping for your guy. But his guy has not been very good. Certainly was not very good yesterday.
No, I mean, and we had Brett Brown said that he got a text at 6:20 a.m. Sunday from Embiid saying that he was ill, had been up all night, and he wasn't sure if he was going to be able to play. And ultimately, he did play, but not particularly well. Now, here's the curious thing, though: he was 2 for 7, he had 11 points, but he was plus 17 in 35 minutes,
weird.
Which is the best on either team.
Best on either team. I think that's more. That stat can be deceptive than anything else. The other thing is he played a lot of minutes, which he often doesn't. He played more minutes than he normally does, which is weird. But the whole thing with that phone call, that seems weird to me. I mean, can you imagine if you're a guy in that position, calling your coach at 6 o'clock in the morning and saying, "I don't think I can play"?
Yeah, I don't know. It must have been extreme.
Unless your leg's hanging off or something, And is he ever going to be healthy enough to be what Kawhi Leonard is for his team right now?
That's the question, isn't it? I mean, you've mentioned this just about how the whole vicious cycle and the old cliche about the best ability is availability. So
there you go.
So as you said, like, will he ever be in the shape where he won't? Will he avoid injury where he can get in shape? And then it goes around and around and around.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't know, and he's an incredibly large human being, and maybe there's some things that just in terms of human physiology that are just harder to manage when all the parts are that big, and he is. I don't know. I don't know what to think about him. He looks so good when he's right, and it's hard to believe the guy he was in Game 3 and the guy he was in Game 4.
Yeah, and
it's amazing.
So now Brett Brown is on as we speak to you, it's Monday, and Game 5 is on Tuesday. And as we speak to you, Brett Brown said on a conference call today that he had no update as far as Embiid is concerned, which is really curious to me because he's the head coach. You would think
the Sixers have had a long history of weirdness with medical issues, right? In this regime, current regime.
Very much.
Yeah, what's up with that, man?
I don't know. I mean, it seems like there's too many cooks are spoiling the broth, or somebody wants to have more say than maybe they should, but it's really been odd, especially with Embiid. I mean, 2 years ago when he hurt his knee in January, and they said it was a bone bruise, well, he played, I think, one game the rest of the year with a bone bruise because of a bone bruise. Yeah. And so now he's had knee problems again late in this year. He missed 14 of their last 24 regular season games. And so
it's not the full-blown Belichick thing where he's just openly, I'm not going to tell you guys anything about anything. It's not like that. It's weird little mixed messages and things. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't know, and it seems like more people are involved, and maybe there's some uncertainty about exactly what they want to throw out there, and then they throw out something that you don't quite understand. So
right.
So it
doesn't make sense. Yeah.
The upshot is, at least you're skeptical if he really was ill. You just wonder if he was ill, or if it was his knee, or if it was this body part or that body part. Yeah. So I think there has to be some healthy skepticism, just given their recent history.
Yeah, no doubt. And now, I mean, I thought I picked Toronto to win this series. I think you did too. They have the advantage, but again, let's not fall into this trap of overreacting to what just happened. I mean, the Sixers can still win this series. I don't think there's any question about it.
It almost seems like they have to win tomorrow.
Well, it would be really tough. It would be really tough for them to win 2 in a row, including a Game 7 on the road. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that I think it's always been shown that the 2-2 and a best of 5, whoever wins Game 5 usually wins the series. Yeah. I forget what the percentage is, but that's usually the case.
And you would think, particularly when the team that wins Game 5 gets Game 7 at home, you would think it would particularly that's the case. But so let's look at the other series now, because I think people maybe underestimated Denver a little bit.
Maybe.
I think they kind of felt like Portland was a little tougher, more seasoned team, and certainly a more experienced team. But you know what? I'll be honest with you. I watched those two teams. This is probably a reach. I'm just going to throw it out there. I think they're the two worst teams, at least in terms of upside, right now. They're the two worst teams still playing, in my opinion.
Probably true. I mean, especially Portland without Nurkic. That doesn't help. I mean, they have Cantor, who's a very capable player, but Nurkic is playing really well, and especially given what they have around him, those two guards are tremendous. So I watched the 4 overtime game, and I watched a good bit of the Game 4 of that series. And I don't think I've watched Jokic enough to really appreciate just how good he is.
Yeah,
they pretty much run their offense through him.
Yeah. And also, he's more athletic than you think. He's strong. He can take it on the he can start in the perimeter and get to the rim even sometimes, and also has the post thing and can shoot the three, but really passes the ball well. And he's not bad defensively either. He's
a big body.
Yeah, he's not quite Embiid.
No.
But, that's a debate about who the best center in the league is.
I mean, I was thinking that it would have been a travesty if Jokic was the first team All-NBA center over Embiid. But now, because of the issues we just talked about, because Embiid is so seldom available, I'm thinking, I'm kind of swinging the other way that maybe Jokic does deserve to be the first.
Well, certainly it's not a tragedy.
No, no. I mean, I for a long time,
a miscarriage of justice.
Yes, for a long time I thought it was because Embiid is so good on defense that there's no way that Jokic. But now I think, well, then there's the availability thing. If he's only available for 60 games a year, should he be the first team All-NBA set?
Yeah, that's right. And it's not a most valuable player award per se, but certainly value. There's value in, as we've said, availability, simple availability.
So, and that's the ongoing issue with him. Now, here's something else that I was just thinking about with the Sixers, and that was Redick is averaging 10 shots a game in this series. Now, obviously, that's been a big focal point of Toronto. Yep. He averaged 13.5 during the regular season. Now, to me, in a game especially like Sundays where you lose by 5, that's a big difference. Because you figure if he gets 3 more shots, he's going to make at least 1.
Yeah.
And they lost by 5. Yeah. So it changes the whole game. So, I mean, it just underscores how valuable he is, especially in the half-court setting. And it underscores how well Toronto has defended him.
Yeah, Toronto is pretty good defensively. They really are. And part of Redick's value is what the other team has to do to defend him. He's just constantly running around and making things happen. And part of that is exacerbated. Part of that is nullified if he's not getting as many shots up. And you know what? He's gotten better at that shot where he's moving sideways. I used to see him do that and think that's a miss. He's never making that. Boy, he makes some hellacious jump shots sometimes where he's moving. Where he's moving this way. Here's the basket. He's moving this way.
He's an incredible player in his own special way.
I mean, he's a specialist.
And he's 35 now, but I mean he keeps himself in great shape. I think he could play for 2 more years just doing what he's doing. And in fact, I think that they're the perfect fit for him just because of what they have around him.
He's big on that sprint training. Which that's his thing in terms of physical training, and obviously you can see why, and you can see how effective it is. That's a good way to work out for you fitness fans out there. That's a good way to mix up your routine. Try a sprint once in a while.
But if it's a great point because when he was at Duke, he was kind of doughy, and now look at him. And even when he got into the NBA, his first 2 years, I think he played 76 games. Limited minutes, and then he kind of got on. Really
I was just looking at his career. I think I was on Basketball Reference looking at his career. You're right. Yeah, there was a lot of years there where he did not play a lot of minutes, and he really did transform himself physically. I think.
There's a guy named Joe Rogowski who was their conditioning coach in Orlando when he was there, and he kind of made JJ into what he has ultimately become. But of course, JJ has taken that to the nth degree because he's been with a few other teams since then, and he's had quite a career. He really
I forgot he was on Milwaukee.
Yeah, just briefly.
Yeah, that's another thing I was looking at in that basketball.
Just briefly, like half a season maybe, right before he went to the Clippers?
Maybe 30 games, something like that, All right, now, let's go big picture with an NBA take. I'm going to throw this at you and see if you tell me how preposterous it is. Now, we've been watching sports for a long, long time, both of us, you and I. And sports evolve over time. Sometimes it naturally happens that the defense gets way ahead of the offense for a period. And so I always feel like the NBA in the 1980s was as good as American team sports has ever been. It was just right. The balance between offense and defense, the way the game was officiated, the way the game was coached. Incredible teams and players. Magic and Bird brought this passing thing back sort of into... Anyway, that was great. And then as time passed and those teams kind of receded, it evolved into a more physical game. It evolved into a more isolation-oriented game. It evolved into a more overcoaching. I felt like there was a lot of guys making a living in the Rick Mahorn mold.
Yes,
making a living in the NBA, and even rotation players on really good teams who really couldn't shoot, handle, pass.
Right,
right. So
that's fair.
Yeah. So anyway, I thought that the bad boy Pistons of that era were either emblematic of that or were influential and caused that to happen. I thought anyway. However, the game got dragged down. I thought it got dragged down and they were emblematic of it. Okay, now flash forward. The game gets less physical. They change the rules. It opens up. The three-point shot becomes a gigantic weapon. I'm sorry, I don't mean to filibuster here, big guy, but you're gonna get a chance to straighten me out. But so now the pendulum, it feels to me, has swung back the other way.
Sure.
And we have a whole new set of things that seem slightly wrong with the NBA, and are the Houston Rockets, who clearly value spacing at the abolition of movement.
Yes.
Right? I mean, they're taking movement out of the game. Are they, to this era, what the Pistons were to the NBA in the 90s?
I like the theory. You mentioned, obviously you mentioned it to me before we started here today. And I like your thinking because I find them really hard to watch. I mean, it's just James Harden pounding the air out of the ball and, maybe he goes to the rim, maybe he shoots a three, maybe he pitches it back out, but it's hard to watch in my estimation. But I mean, obviously it's very effective, given their personnel. But I'd much rather watch Golden State where there's more five-man movement. Although they've kind of fallen into like a little bit of that too with Durant in some respects. So.
Yeah, and I wonder if they've fallen into that to a fault a little bit. I think Curry has lost confidence.
Isn't that crazy to think? That's crazy.
Yeah, a guy who was so confident, so skilled, a guy who supposedly works on his skills to a fanatical degree, it seems like he's all of a sudden lost it a little bit. And maybe he's hurt. That's always right.
Well, he had the ankle, and then he hurt his finger. They said it was a dislocation, but maybe it's worse than that. I mean, to his credit, he didn't dwell on that after he's had such a horrible game in Game 3. He said it wasn't due to the finger or anything like that. It was just a bad night. So, if that's true, you would expect at some point he's going to explode. That's sort of inevitable.
He's just too good.
It would appear.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, the Game 3 was. He missed a layup and a dunk in overtime, which were obviously just killers.
Yeah.
I mean. I heard, right. And then he missed a couple other easy shots in regulation too. I mean, I was listening to, I forget what show it was, some radio show last night where they were talking about, well, Durant didn't have the ball for 3 straight possessions in overtime. Well, yeah, but they got a layup, a missed dunk, and a wide open Klay Thompson 15-footer. You take that every time. I mean, they made none of them, but still, you take that every time.
That was bogus. I heard people saying that too.
That's crazy. Granted, Durant had a great game, but I mean, those two guys. I mean, you'll take your chances with that every time.
Yeah, this is the thing with, well, it's crunch time. We have to get the ball to this guy. No, that's not how you play basketball.
Not when you have those guys.
That's not right. That's not how you play basketball. That's wrong. That's part of the Kobe problem.
Yes.
That's people who think that basketball is a cowboy movie. It's got to be Kobe had to be the guy. I think Kobe, in his soul, the most important thing about basketball is I'm going to be the guy having the gunfight at the OK Corral at the end of the movie. I got to be that guy. And
I like that analogy.
Yeah. So, I don't buy that at all. But Draymond Green's playing great, I think.
Yes.
Thompson's been okay. I mean, he hasn't been super Thompson, but he's been good. And I think defensively they've battled pretty well. And yet they're in a fight.
It's probably a game they would normally win. I mean, like literally 8 times out of 10.
Yeah, and then it's 3-0, and we're not talking about this.
Yeah. So I mean, I think it's. And, as we speak, I mean, Golden State plays tonight. It's Monday, so, it might be a moot conversation.
We might look ridiculous, but still, I think there is a little something going on with Curry. Curry's not right for whether it's physical, mental, emotional, or some combination of the three. Right?
Yeah, it's sort of like the year that they blew the 3-1 lead in the finals. I didn't think he was right that year either.
Yeah, and people thought he was hurt then too, which he may have been.
So I think it's a pretty comparable situation as far as that goes. So where next?
What do we got? Well, we got. I wrote a column in today's paper about a guy from Lancaster named Dustin Salisbury, who many people from around here are going to remember, a very, very talented basketball player who was probably an NBA caliber talent. 15, 17, 18 years ago. And he's still playing basketball, and he's played in like 10 different countries. He's currently playing in Tunisia, which is, in case you didn't know, folks, a little geography lesson. Tunisia is on the northern tip of the continent of Africa. It's only looks like 200 miles or so from Sicily.
Whoa.
It's on the Mediterranean Sea. Half the country is shore, and he said it's mostly beach.
Sounds like a great place to be.
Yeah, he wasn't complaining. Now he has played I think 2 stints in France,
right?
And they speak Arabic and French in this country, so maybe that helps him get along. But the interesting thing about this, is that America is by far the best basketball country in the world, invented basketball, far more advanced in every way and yet guys that are really good. Like at one point, maybe one of the 600 or so best basketball players in the world can't make a living in America playing basketball.
That's crazy, isn't it? Yeah. I don't know if that speaks to just how tight the strainer gets and just how you have to be in the right situation at the right time. I mean, take a Dustin Salisbury and let's take, I don't know. I don't have a good analog. There had to be an NBA player at that point that he was probably better than, but the situation was right for player X, whoever that might be, than it was for Dustin, or he didn't know the right people or whatever.
Yeah. And of course, the science of team building and player development and all that is not precise enough that every player in the NBA is better than every player who's not in the NBA.
Right,
of course, but still, there's enough overlap there. But just think about like a hockey player who is as good as Dustin Salisbury would certainly easily have been able to play in the AHL, play for the Hershey Bears, and I would say. Baseball is a little different because if you don't make the big leagues by the time you're 34, which is what Dustin is now, the minor leagues are essentially developmental, so you'd probably be out the door. But I mean, he certainly was the equivalent of a AAA baseball player, don't you think?
I mean, don't you think part of it too is that the G League, the pay scale there isn't nearly what it is in a lot of places overseas.
It's not even close.
Yeah. So I think that's part of it. Why you end up with players like him. I remember Tyler Smith, who played at Penn State. He wrote a book about his experiences, and he played in like Uruguay and I think Belgium and Japan. Actually, I talked to him about his book, and he talked about how he was in Japan when there was a really severe earthquake there, which was obviously a pretty frightening thing. And so it was like he actually enjoyed it. It was like a decade-long career. And the book was very interesting. I always find these books interesting because those guys, as you and I both know, are always more interesting than the stars anyway, especially when they're as bright as Tyler is.
Yeah.
So it was just really kind of curious about just how his career unfolded, about how he went from being a single guy to a married guy with 2 children in Japan, and so on and so forth. Just and every year it was sort of the same thing. Well, am I going to find a place to play? Should I try to find a place to play, or should I get on with my life?
Yeah.
So it's probably
like if you have a decade-long career, you probably have 6 or 8 moments like that where you're kind of thinking about that. Yeah.
Should I do it or not? And I guess he got paid pretty well in Japan, but there were some countries where he didn't get paid as well, didn't get paid when he should have. And things like that.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. Sure, there's got to be, And this is really kind of interesting because, and then you think about Jerry Johnson is another guy from McCaskey who was a terrific basketball player.
He was.
And just like Dustin, I mean, he was at least a AAA, basketball player. But if you think about the kind of personality of a guy who could be like this citizen of the world and live in these far-flung places, you wouldn't have thought Jerry Johnson was
probably not
particularly that guy. I'm not saying particularly not that guy. You wouldn't have, whereas, for example, a guy like Lee Melchioni, I would think that he would be that kind of guy. He tried it for less than a full season in Italy and came home. He didn't like it. And Jerry played in Kazakhstan?
I forget which one of those republics it was. But it was a good situation, right? They had an American school for his kids.
Yes, that's right.
So it was a really good situation for him. Yeah, it's all about that.
Yeah.
I mean, because there are a lot of... It's all about fit and, quality of life things, because you would think, like a guy like Melchioni, Italy is apparently the best place to play for the most part. But, I'm sure there are places
that's what everybody says,
but it's not. I'm sure there are outposts where you don't want to be too.
Yeah, here's another thing about this is you can make a living playing basketball overseas, even if you are by American standards not nearly as good a player as Dustin Salisbury. I had a guy, there was a guy named Anthony Troutman who played for Lebanon High, who played for Lebanon Valley College, and I was his first basketball coach. I coached him when he was a little dude, and we had a great relationship. Him and his father and I,
nice.
I loved dealing with that kid. He really loved basketball. And he went over to Germany for a couple years and played and had games where he scored 28 points, and he was a Division III college player. There are other examples of that. I mean, who's the guy, Lineball from Anvil Clayona, went over and I think he played the Netherlands or something and led the league in scoring, and then he was like a player coach, and
Well, who was the guy who played at Lebanon Valley last year? Their guard, because he's playing overseas.
I can't think of his name now. Sam Light.
Yeah, Sam Light.
Yeah. He was in Spain, I think.
That sounds right.
Now he's being kind of mentored by Andy Panko, who played a long time in Spain.
Yeah, he did.
So maybe that was the connection there. But then he came home, and then I'm not sure what's happening with him. It's another one of those deals where the situation wasn't maybe ideal. And the other thing is, a lot of these overseas teams have a limited number of Americans that they have in their team. Like Dustin, for example, was on a team that had a number that won the Tunisian League Championship 2 years in a row. But they had a lot, like half of the team was the Tunisian national team. So which that phrase is funny, isn't it? The Tunisian national team. So they got a new coach. Apparently he wanted more Tunisian dudes on the team. So Dustin's out the door. So he goes to another team, and they beat that team in the finals. So Dustin won the Tunisian League Championship 3 years in a row, and he pointed out that he is the only American ever to do that.
There you go. So
I'm sure it's a large control group in that experiment.
Put that on the resume. But it's interesting, just the number of people from this area that have had that. John Fox played for a long, long time in Italy.
Yeah, he's from Millersville University. He was a very good player.
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
And I think he played there when Daryl Dawkins was there, actually.
Wow.
I think I remember him talking about that, which is kind of a curious image. Daryl apparently was, as he always was a very popular guy. And
by the way, his son is verbally committed to Penn State to play football.
Go figure. It all ties together, Mike. It all ties together.
Does it? I think it does. All right, what's happening next? What's going on, big guy?
Well, we have Sixers-Raptors on Thursday, Game 6. There will be a Game 6. We know that for sure. Might be the last gasp of the Sixers season, which, obviously there's all kinds of implications to that. I mean, does Brett Brown survive if they lose this round? I mean, there's a lot of speculation that he will not.
I think if they lose in the first round, he gets pushed out the door. Mm-hmm. If they go past this round, there's no way they push him out the door.
Right.
This round is kind of
that's what I think too. Because Josh Harris has said that we should go beyond what we did last year. And right now they're exactly at the same point they were. I mean, they won one more game in this round than they did, but that's obviously not. That's negligible value.
It's negligible value, but I think their program has advanced.
You would think.
In a year.
I mean,
I do. I wish that he wouldn't have said that.
Yeah, and it was surprising that he did.
And maybe he wishes he wouldn't have said that. Because he doesn't seem like a run at the mouth guy.
No, but he said it in the biggest possible forum. It was an ESPN.com story with Jackie McMullen. The legendary Jackie McMullen.
God love her.
Yes, and so I'm guessing he knew his audience. He knew what where that was how that was gonna hit. So it'll be curious that, and what happens to Jimmy Butler, what happens to Tobias Harris, what happens to JJ Redick. All three of those are free agents, and
this is the modern reality of the NBA to some extent, but it's pretty extremely so in this case. I mean, Simmons and Embiid are going to be there next year, but who else is? It'll be interesting to see. I'm not sure. I think Tobias Harris will be too.
I think so. I mean, it's interesting. Obviously, the Sixers can pay those guys more than an outside team can. But here's another little twist to this. I mean, Simmons is coming up where he can get a new contract this summer. So what do you do there?
Yeah.
I mean, off what we've seen. I mean, to me, that's a real wild card. I'm thinking there's a sizable part of the fan base that would say we can't pay this guy a max contract off what we're seeing here because he can't shoot. He hesitates to go to the rim. Now, that was an interesting thing. That question was put to Brett Brown on the conference call today, too, about, does he not go to the rim because he's afraid he's going to miss foul shots as he did in Game 4? He missed 2. Yeah. And, Brett, of course, defended his guy, and he said, no, that's not a factor. But, you got to believe it is. At the end of the game, he's very hesitant to really assert himself.
When we had Jimmy Lynam on the show and we asked him about this, and he said he's got to change the channel, which is a sort of an odd little way of saying it, but the changing of the channel probably can't happen until after this is all over with. And he figures out what to do this summer about it and what he wants to be as a player. But he's almost a point guard, but can he be the point guard in crunch time, and can he be in the playoffs? I mean, he has some of those skills, and he brings some things that are kind of unique, but I don't know.
Because even the Sixers would seem to indicate that they don't think he can be the point guard, because Jimmy Butler's the point guard in crunch time.
That was a clear, and it's funny because somebody asked Brett Brown about this. I think it was D Lynam actually the other night. Was there a point where you made that shift? Because they clearly decided we've got to do something different, and he said there wasn't. He said it was a thing that evolved over time, but it clearly did happen, and it clearly was a change from their thinking at the beginning of this season, right?
Yeah, it was. I mean, they obviously had to make dramatic changes when they brought in first Butler and then Tobias Harris, and I think they've kind of figured it out. Although Tobias had just an awful game on Sunday, just awful. 7 for 23, 2 for 13 from 3, and it really seems to me that Toronto's inviting him.
Yeah,
they're loading up against Redick, and they're saying, "Okay, Tobias, you want to beat us?" It seems like they don't think he can,
which surprises me because he has been a really efficient offensive player. For most of the recent years.
So that gets back to the whole mental side of it. Where is his head right now? Because he seems like he's a little bit. I hate to say this because he seems like a really good guy, but he seems a little fragile. That he can't quite find his way through that stuff. Whereas Redick, he just keeps firing.
Yeah.
That's just how he is.
Yeah, Redick has this specific little routine. He's running off of screens and he's doing those dribble handoffs. And
Well, it's funny to me. This has nothing to do with anything, but it was just funny to me when he gets introduced before games. You know how they tend to run sets where he starts in the right corner, comes charging out to the arc and gets a dribble handoff a lot of times from Embiid. Well, before the game, when he runs out for warm-ups, he makes a point. He does this loop where he runs to the left corner, and the members of the flight squad are all. I never noticed this before until the playoff. So I'm assuming he's been doing it, but it's just funny to me that's like his little home, the left corner.
Remember Mixville?
Yeah,
this is JJville.
Yeah, so I'm hoping I can use that at some point, but I haven't had.
Oh, you got to work it in.
Yeah, got to work it at some point. So. I might only have one more chance.
Yeah, really. The time is getting nigh here. Yeah. Well, I'm gonna do a piece, I hope, with Jerry Johnson. If I can get him on the phone, that's one of the things that.
Yeah, excellent. I love Jerry. He's a great guy.
Going on. He really is a good guy, and
it's like. First, here, this is another little thing that just gets stuck in my mind. Jerry Johnson, he's a freshman at McCaskey. He's playing with the varsity because he's that good.
Right.
And he plays really well in a playoff game, and I don't know where it was, maybe Warwick or something like that. So I'm sitting there at the scorer's table, and some McCaskey fans are filing out behind me. The game's over, it's, last couple minutes, and some guy just goes, "Hey, Jerry, good stuff!" And I'll forever associate Jerry with that.
Wow, good stuff. Yeah, he's got a lot of good stuff.
He had a lot of good stuff in the course of his time. That's for sure.
What a player. So, and the other story that I'm hope to connect on the other side of the world is Sharunas Jasikavis. Who supposedly is interviewing for the Memphis Grizzlies job after interviewing for the Toronto job last offseason. Mm-hmm. And he is a guy who is in what country is he from?
Oh, God.
Sorry, big guy. He's from over there.
Lithuania.
That's right. That's correct. Lithuania.
Honest Lithuania.
And he was an exchange student who played high school basketball in Lancaster County, played at the University of Maryland, played in the Olympics, played briefly in the NBA.
Briefly, yeah.
And now is a very successful coach over in that part of the world. So, and a pretty good talker if I can get him on the phone. So I hope that.
Yeah, to me, that's a really good story because, it's been a while and he's obviously had a great international career in a lot of respects. So good for him.
Good for him. Yeah. There you go. And good for us. All right. That's the show. The Twitter address is @buzzerafter. The Gmail is afterbuzzer@gmail.com. And Facebook, just look for After the Buzzer. We are available on YouTube, every episode of the big broadcast, the big podcast. And we'll check you out again soon. I'm Mike. I got it right this time. I'm Mike. He's Gordie. And we'll see you later.